Welcome to ITProTV, your source for online IT training. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned IT pro, we've got courses to meet your needs. CompTIA, Cisco, Linux, Apple, Microsoft, security, cloud, and more. All online, all on demand. Check out our binge-worthy IT training at ITPro.tv.
Hello, and thanks for joining us today for this ITProTV webinar. Have a question? Use the GoToWebinar question box throughout the webinar, and we will answer as many as we can at the end. You will receive a link to the recording of the webinar delivered to your inbox. Now let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to the ITProTV webinar series live from the ITProTV studios. I'm your moderator for today, Lauren Deal, and I'm here with Wes Bryan, today's host, and Adam Gordon, today's presenter. Wes is one of our ITProTV edutainers, specializing in topics like CompTIA and hardware. He holds certifications in A+, Security+, Cloud+, and many more. Wes just finished our new CompTIA Cloud Essentials Plus course, which can be found in our course library. Adam is an author, consultant, and educator who has trained students around the globe. He works with several vendor platforms in virtualization, cloud, security, and more. He's also an ITProTV edutainer. So what exactly is ITProTV? Well, ITProTV is a place to watch and learn. We offer an engaging way to learn and grow your career. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned IT pro, we've got courses to meet your needs. CompTIA, Cisco, Linux, Apple, Microsoft, security, cloud, and more. All online, all on demand. So check us out at itpro.tv. Now, if you send in a question today, you'll be entered to win your choice of ITProTV swag, like a t-shirt, socks, or wireless charger. If you're watching on Zoom or LinkedIn Live, put your questions in chat. And if you're watching on the live stream, thank you so much for being a member. You can put your questions in the chat as well. All right, Wes and Adam, let's get started on today's topic. What have you been missing in Azure? Hidden gems that you should be mining.
All right, everybody, thank you. And Lauren, thank you so much for that warm welcome. And as the host here of this webinar, I extend that warm welcome to everybody that is joining us. And speaking of joining us, you've heard it, Mr. Adam Gordon. That's right, we're going to be talking about Azure and some of the things that well, most likely you've been missing. And I know I've been in Azure a little bit too, so I want to find out a little bit more about those hidden gems and what I might be missing as well. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. Looking forward to talking about Azure.
Yes, thank you, Wes. Great to spend time with you and, of course, with all of our viewers who are watching and hopefully will watch on the recording. So Azure, you know, it's a big place. There's a lot going on. It is one of the three major cloud services from one of the three major cloud service providers, really battling out for the #1 position, going back and forth between Microsoft and Amazon. Regardless of what platform you use, cloud services can be really beneficial to your organization. We'll talk about some ways in which we can extract that value as we get started, but you've got to have a roadmap. You've got to understand what you're looking to accomplish, and ultimately how you get there is a question of making good choices. So Wes, I know you've got some questions about making good choices, and I know you want to ask about some very specific things in Azure. So let me throw it back to you. Let's get started with some of the questions, see what we can talk about.
Sounds great. We've got three technologies that I definitely want to ask you about because I know they've got a lot of value, but I'm sure I might have missed some of that value, so you can help me out with this as well. One of the first ones I want to ask you is kind of like a twofer question here, if you will. It's the what and why, and we're going to talk about Azure Advisor. You know, really just what is Azure Advisor, and what are some of the benefits to an organization that maybe adopts it?
Absolutely. So it's a great place for us to jump in and begin our conversation. I was just mentioning a moment ago that, you know, you have to have a roadmap to go into the cloud and to ultimately recognize value and be successful. It's easy to say, I want to be in the cloud. It's hard to be in the cloud with purpose and ultimately with benefit to your organization, whether you're small, large, or even medium-sized business. Moving between those segments can be problematic as we grow our business and look for services and offerings that help us to do that. And Azure Advisor is one of those hidden gems in Azure that I find as I talk to customers, I talk to students when I'm teaching, when I'm out in the field with customers on site. When I mention it to them, they often, many of them don't realize it's there. It is essentially a free capability that Microsoft provides to all customers on the Azure platform. So the first thing we want to note in regards to Wes's question, what is it? It's a free service, not something you're paying for as an add-on, but rather something you get as part of licensing and ultimately onboarding into Azure. And what it provides is several things, but the most important thing is an assessment of your infrastructure as you grow it and add to it over time. And it allows you, as a result of that assessment, to be given insights and recommendations that Microsoft is offering you, essentially saying, hey, you know what, if you did these things, whatever they are by category, whether it's in security, whether it's in optimization and performance, there are several areas, including cost management, that we can see and understand recommendations across. If we do those things, we're going to be fine-tuning, optimizing, and getting more out of our investment in the Azure platform as we continue to use, but ultimately continue to grow. So, Wes, it is first and foremost a recommendation solution. It allows us to get the benefit of the best practice and optimization guidance Microsoft has figured out how to use, not only to grow their own internal use of Azure, but ultimately grow and scale that use for customers globally, and why it is important for beneficial for, why is it important for organizations to think about using it? Second part of your question, because it gives us guidance that is going to help us to really tune up and ultimately optimize our investment. It's easy to put cloud resources to work. It's hard to make sure we're putting the right ones to work at the right scale with ultimately the right measurements for success. And Advisor can help us to fine tune and understand what those success metrics look like by making good choices and ultimately implementing those choices to our benefit.
That's great, Adam. You know, having some kind of on-call advisor, right? Some consultant would have a lot of expense behind it. So to see that this is a free service that is native to the Azure platform, truly one of those gems. So here's the next question. Can we see it for you take it for a test drive? Can you show us how it works?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the good news is no permission slips required, and you can keep your hands in or outside of the car while we take a look. So join me here if you will. We're going to go right into Azure. I've got the Azure portal set up. I'm already logged in. We're skipping over some of the basics, like how do I get into Azure? How do I set up a tenant? We're assuming you're already an Azure customer. If you're not, by the way, no harm in that. Do watch what we're doing, but we're just making the assumption you're already actively using Azure. So we're skipping over some of those basics. So I'm in the Azure portal, and what I've done is simply using my navigation area, my shortcut navigation bar on the left, as you can see right over here, as I'm kind of scrolling up and down. Most of you will have the advisor element pinned right there as a shortcut link. If you don't, by the way, you can modify this list so it may or may not look like that for you. But if it's not there for some reason, take note of the name and the icon, the cloud with what looks like a little ribbon hanging off the right-hand side. We can go up here to all services. We could search for it from the master catalog of services from the marketplace, or we can use our search bar right up at the top, that gray rectangle, start typing in this case, the word advisor, and we'll be able to see it and then click on it. However we get there, let's assume you've figured out how to open it, even if you've never used it before. And once you've done that, you're going to be given a view that looks like this. I'm going to switch to the overview blade because that's where you'll likely pop in initially. And what you'll see on the overview blade is we have these different areas. These are the areas that are over here. And let me make this just a little bit bigger for you while we're talking so you can see that a little more clearly. We've got recommendations in these categories, as I was mentioning, as we were answering Wes's first couple of questions. Hey, what is this? How does it work and why? When we think about what it is, I mentioned we can see recommendations in categorical areas like cost, security, reliability, operational excellence, and or performance. So we have a total of 5 key categorical areas. And we see them represented to the right over here on the overview blade on what we could say is essentially a dashboard with live tiles, these individual cards that update and represent, as you could see for security on the right. I have some open recommendations I have not currently taken advantage of, but you could see for cost, in the cost area, I'm good. I have all the recommendations that Microsoft has currently thought would be beneficial to me and this tenant in Azure under control. I've got a green circle, white check. It says you are following all of the cost recommendations currently. So essentially, I'm optimized when it comes to cost management, but I've clearly got some work to do with security. And then we'll drill in. We'll take a look in a moment. And you can see with reliability, I seem to have at least one recommendation. Operational excellence, I seem to be good there. No recommendations currently open. And performance, I'm also up to date. So 3 out of the 5 categories, I've done everything that Microsoft has recommended I should do. But 2 of them, I have some outstanding recommendations. And so the power of Advisor is first visually giving us this cue that there may be some work to do. Now, on all of the blades, all of the areas as I look at recommendations, I have an option to download those recommendations. You can see right over there as I'm pointing to the toolbar, right to the right of feedback as we move across here, I can download as either a CSV or a PDF. So I can consume these recommendations and this outstanding information in a variety of ways, taking it outside of the system. And when I download it, I'm going to show you what that looks like when we go into one of these areas. You can see them. I'm going to be able to have those recommendations. I tell customers this all the time. Download them, create a baseline. Use that hit list at that moment in time that Microsoft says you're outstanding on, right? And or you have work to do, I should say, right? You still have recommendations to implement. Use that as your baseline. Say, as of January of this year, I had this many recommendations outstanding. And then we can revisit that on an ongoing basis, maybe monthly, maybe quarterly, do an update assessment, see how much progress you've made. And now we have documentary evidence. So when we go back to look at your work over time, we go back to audit, we go back and we do any number of things to help understand that transformation. We have actual information we can reference. So this is going to become really important for you as you plan your cloud journey and look at how you're optimizing over time. So take advantage of those download links. All right, so when we go in and we drill a little deeper, I'm going to change our view. We're going to go to Advisor Score. This is in preview currently. This is the view you just saw as we opened the tool initially. And the difference is that I'm seeing the same information from the overview blade, but I'm seeing it in a different way. It's being presented in a slightly different visual way. I have the ability to filter, so it's a little bit more readily accessible and manipulated for my particular needs as I look at it. Preview simply means Microsoft is rolling out this feature. It's not fully necessarily as perhaps fully baked and or fully ready as it will be when it goes to what we call GA, or general availability. But it will look very similar to this and indeed should be available for you to use. It's really just a different way of visualizing. But as you see, one of the things I get here is I see an all-up percentage of my Advisor score. I'm 83% optimized, given the recommendations Microsoft has made versus the ones that are outstanding. Still got work to do. That score should be 100% if I'm implementing all recommendations. But I'm certainly well over 3/4 of the way there. So that's good to know. I also can see a score history here. I can see how I have progressed over time with my score hovering at any one area to see that back in May, I was near 100%, whereas now towards July on a monthly by monthly basis, I've dipped down into the 70s. So I see there's been change. Maybe I've rolled out some new infrastructure, but I haven't kept up with implementing all the recommendations Microsoft may have for me around that infrastructure. I could change this view. I can look at it monthly, weekly, daily, so I can see a little bit more detail, again, slightly different than the overview blade. If I go in and look at a weekly distribution, I could see that break out, and I could see that I am indeed heading back up as I go into the latter part of August, but I'm dipping. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride going up and down. So there's definitely some churn there. And if I want to go in by category and I want to see where I have outstanding issues, and then I want to drill down, I'm given that information here. I could see the bar chart with a link to be able to go in. And this link, by the way, will take me right here to recommendations so I could drill down as well. I can also see this categorically set up the same way I did on the overview blade with the little tiles where I can click through, and I can see all of that information. If I want to click through security, whether I click here, whether I click up above right here, whether I click over here under recommendations, they're all the same. It takes me to the same place. I can drill in, and I begin to see the exact specific recommendations, and then I can create actionable plans around implementing or modifying them as necessary. Remember, I can download a list to create that roadmap so I can create action around that. And I can see all of the recommendations. In security, I've got close to 50 open ones, so there are a number. And they're categorized here with impact. In this case, there are a number of high impact recommendations. Obviously, I'd want to think about those. Looks like I have 4 pages of recommendations. If we jump to the end, you'll see I've got some that are low impact. In the middle, I've got some that are of medium impact. And so I can go ahead and click on any one of these. Doesn't matter which one it is. Audit usage of custom RBAC rules, whatever the case may be. Looks like it's going to impact 2 resources in this particular case. Some of these will impact multiple resources, some only a few. Let's choose the one that we were just looking at right there. I'm going to click on that. And what I'm going to see is that I'm going to see the actual recommendation. It's going to give me more information. It's going to give me a high-level description. It's going to give me the affected resources. It'll show me what those affected resources are. I can click through seeing each one of them individually. And if there is information about what this may be that I have to take some action around in terms of what I need to do, it'll tell me, and there'll be a link to take the recommendation. This one is really just straightforward. It says, hey, you should audit some of these resources. You're not currently doing that. So I could look at one of these resources, whatever this particular one may be, and I can go in and I can decide, you know what, maybe I do need to take action here. And then I can go ahead and take whatever action is recommended to me. Or I could say, you know what, this is okay, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at some of these other recommendations. Let's go back to one of the high impact ones. External accounts with read permission should be removed from subscription. Okay, that's probably something really important. If I look at this one, it tells me right here under remediation steps, I have a step-by-step set of instructions for me to go in and manually remediate. I can follow those steps. So Microsoft doesn't just give me a recommendation. They will almost without exception always give me guidance and tell me what to do. Now, some of that guidance may be automated. I may be able to click a button, apply a template-based fix, make a change in a workflow. There's a variety of ways those recommendations and the guidance element will show up. But basically what I'm being given here is the benefit of literally trillions of transactions being monitored on the Microsoft Azure platform globally, what we call signals on a daily basis. And then the benefit of the analysis of that group of information, that massive amount of data, and the aggregation of that to understand what is working well, what is problematic, and how we can make changes, but do so in a safe way that is time-tested and best practice aligned. So Wes, this is what Advisor looks like. We just rinse and repeat across all the different categories, and we take whatever recommendations and whatever actions we think are going to be most impactful, as you could see, maybe leaving some on the table, and we track that over time.
All right, very good. What a true gem to be able to have that personal advisor that is in real time and attached to your account too. Now, another thing that's very, very important is you mentioned that, infrastructure can get very, very complex. If you have a very small infrastructure, a couple of virtual machines, maybe a network, then collecting things like telemetry data and being able to see that information, maybe not so difficult, but as the elements within your Azure platform or your resources grow, one of the things that's going to be important is to be able to have some insights on that telemetry data. So my next question is about another feature of Azure, and that's something known as the Azure Monitor. So I'm going to ask you the same couple of questions to start out. What is Azure Monitor, and how does it benefit my organization?
Absolutely. So Azure Monitor, believe it or not, is actually one of the things that is tied into the discussion we were just having about Azure Advisor. Many of the recommendations will involve changing or configuring and modifying existing settings in some way, and then following up with monitoring of the impact of those changes. Azure Monitor is just what the name implies. It is a monitoring capability built directly into the cloud platform, into Azure. The majority of its use is, again, free as part of the use of Azure once you license and have a tenant stood up. There are elements that will involve a pay-as-you-go bump in terms of gathering data, because a lot of what we're doing with monitoring is looking at existing logs from infrastructure, but we can also then gather that data and feed it into other platforms, like, for instance, Microsoft Sentinel. We can use a log analytics workspace to be able to do that, and we have to pay for the amount of transactional churn and the amount of storage that we require to move that data and work with it. So there may be additional capabilities that we have to pay for, but the baseline of using Azure Monitor is essentially free. It's built in. We just have to enable it, and we have to then obviously know how to use it. Now, why it may be important to do all that monitoring, whether it's on virtual machines, whether it's on Microsoft SQL instances, whether it's on Azure Key Vault instances, the list keeps growing. We've got about 12 to 15 services and resource areas we can currently monitor. 4 more are being added all the time. And what Azure Monitor actually has done is integrate a lot of individual and distinctly different insight and monitoring capabilities that existed in silos on their own in the platform across Azure over the last several years, has brought them all together and given us a common front end to access the log analytics workspace, the application insights capability, the deep and detailed monitoring, the log aggregation, all those things you'll see are part of that. Why is that important? Well, it's important because if we don't monitor, we don't pay attention, we don't understand what's going on with that infrastructure, bad things happen. It's one thing to turn on a server, and then in the old school way of doing things, when we would rack and stack infrastructure, like you would see in a data center, such as the one behind me here in our studios, we would have people on site, Wes, myself, any of you. We'd be in and out of that server closet multiple times a day, right? And in some cases, many cases, we often would be in there for long periods of time, looking at individual systems, monitoring them both on site, in person, and remotely. And we would have a good sense of what was going on with our infrastructure. When it's running in a cloud data center, not behind me, not where I can go see it, but literally where it may be thousands of miles away from me, halfway around the world, I have no visibility into that physically. I can only log in and see it remotely, removed from the actual context of it running. Monitoring becomes even more important in that context, because if we don't monitor, we have no idea what's going on with our infrastructure, no idea who's using it, no idea how it's being used, and most importantly, equally importantly, I should say, what kind of risks are posed and threats are posed by that activity, and how much it's costing myself and or you and your organization. So Wes, what it is and why it's important, probably summed up by saying, if we don't monitor, we are probably missing important activity, and we're probably paying too much for the services we're using.
All right, let's not do any injustice to our viewers then. Let's go ahead and I'll ask you, can we see it taken for a test drive, if you will? Can we see how it works?
Absolutely. So we go back into the Azure portal where we were just a minute ago. Join me back here if you will. I've just reset our view, so we're basically landing back on the home page and the dashboard, or the dashboard blade, I should say. This is often where you start your journey in Azure as you log into the portal. And again, if we scroll down to the navigation shortcut area here, right around and actually right above where Advisor is, at least in my list anyway, you can see it right there, you will see that Monitor is there. Again, it may or may not be on that list, pinned in that location. You can modify those shortcuts. If it's not there for you, or you're using it all the time and you know how to get to it, but if it's not, you can use the All Services area to search. You can also search for it right up here by name, right? A little real world tip for you while we click on Monitor, just to bring it up. Any of the services that you search for using the search bar up here that have the word Azure fronting them, if you start by searching Azure, you're going to get a complete list, perhaps 100 or more, depending on what the particular count is at any given time. It's going to be really hard to find. What I tell people all the time is, don't search the word Azure, search the name of the service, Monitor, Key Vault, whatever, and you'll find it will narrow and focus and scope that search for you dramatically. So it'll make it a lot easier for you to find. All right, so you can see Monitor is up. We are on, again, the overview blade. We see that there is, again, a dashboard-like interface, got a bunch of cards that we can click through to see all the different areas where we can get what Microsoft refers to as insights. As we navigate down, you'll see right here. And as I mentioned, this list is growing all the time. We have applications, virtual machines, storage accounts, containers, networks, SQL, and SQL Server instances, which is currently in preview. We have key vaults. You can see the list here. Got about 10 to 12, and it's growing all the time. So there's always new things happening. And we can access all those right off the overview blade right here, drilling in to see individual ones. These links will just take me, if I click view, to any of the links right over here. They're all the same. In addition, I can see activity and track activity through the actual Monitor tool itself. I can look at alerts that are generated as a result of monitoring categorically. I can see all up metrics. I can see logs that are being brought in, ingested, and analyze them using the query engine. I can look at change analysis, see what changes are occurring across the platform on monitored infrastructure, and I can see the output of that change, tracking it over time. I can look at global service health for the Azure platform around the world, drilling in to look at individual services that may or may not be affecting me. And I could see if there's any service advisories or security advisories, as well as planned outages or maintenance that Microsoft is implementing. All that's available right here. Now, you can get that as a tenant from other places, but it's nice that it's all in one place now. So we have all that. We also up here, let me just scroll back up, have some capability to look at tutorials, find out what's new, things like that. Now, we're not too interested in that right now, but let's go in, let's take a look at a couple of things we can do with the metrics area being the first place we'll go. We can grab metrics on any of the resources that are under management or are being looked at right now. And I can see, for instance, these are my resource groups. If I go in and look at my resource group, so let me click through, I can see that I have a key vault here, and I can, for instance, select the key vault. And depending on what I do, I can then go down and I can apply, and I can then grab metrics for the Key Vault. And essentially, if you're familiar with Performance Monitor and are working with that in Windows or have worked with it in Windows, you would recognize this interface. It will look very similar to you. This is going to basically give me, or at least approximate, what I would see as I look at Performance Monitor on individual systems. I'll be able to grab the namespace. I'll be able to then select a metric depending on the resource I use. Of course, there'll be different metrics for everyone. Maybe I want to look at perhaps overall vault availability or API hits on the vault on a service, something like that. And then I can look at an aggregation, so I'm looking at count, average, min, max, sum, and I can specify what that looks like. Looks like I've been running at 100% in this case availability for the vault over that time period. So I can begin to see what performance looks like. I can add metrics, filter, split, modify this, put it out as a line chart, area chart, bar chart. This is visualization of the ability to monitor and look at those outputs in any form that I want. And it's exportable. I can actually take this information and save it right here to my dashboard. And as a result of that, I can keep this up to date. I can also send it out, create a workbook so I can run this and optimize and update this on an ongoing basis if I want to. So got a lot of capabilities here. I could share this not only, as you can see, through a dashboard, but I can also download to Excel. So using Excel offline, I can give people this link and let them log in and see this if I choose to. And as I mentioned, I can use this in a workbook to be able to do additional follow-up monitoring. Just one of the elements that we can look at here. I personally like the change analysis capabilities here. This is a newer feature. I can look at change that is occurring across the infrastructure by day and time. I can drill down on any one of these things, as you can see, and I can take a look at information about this change, and I can then understand exactly what's happening, building a timeline for things that may have occurred that I may or may not want to know more about. There's not a lot of detail on this particular one, but you'll see I can go in, I can view the resource directly, so I have a link to be able to cross-reference what I'm looking at, and everything is interconnected. This is the beauty of the monitoring capabilities. All right, let's back up here just a couple of steps. Let's go back to our dashboard, go back into Monitor, and a couple other things I just want to show you. I mentioned that service health capability globally. This is just for those of you that might want to know and see what this looks like. I can see the global health here. I can, again, scope that based on any number of things, as you can see. And I can drill down on plan maintenance, health advisories, and security advisories, as I mentioned. I can also look at health history. And I can look at individual resource health as well. So like that a lot. When it comes to individual monitoring, I'm going to go into virtual machines because I have multiple VMs running right now. So I can go in, and there's actually a really cool view in virtual machines I want to show you. I get an overall overview of just what's happening, really with just some clickable links to enable things. We want to go to the overview area, and I'm going to see that I have here 3 virtual machines of 4 that are currently being monitored. One is not, so one is out of monitoring. I have a domain controller that I'm running that I'm not monitoring, but I have 3 virtual machine instances. You can see them there: ITProTV 1, ITProTV 2, ITProTV SQL4. All of them are running. One is a Windows machine, one is a Linux machine running Ubuntu, and one is a Windows-based SQL server. And I could drill through any one of them, but I can see the not monitored versus monitored view, and I can enable the monitoring on a system that is unmonitored very easily by going in and clicking on the Enable button. I want to show you just how easy it is to turn on monitoring. We'll turn it on for ITPTV3 because the other machine there is my domain controller, and I don't want to have that one monitored right now. We click Enable. It takes us to a little window here, and there's a button. It says, hey, enable this. No problem. Click Enable. Make a couple of choices here. Do I want to use the Azure Monitor agent, which is the newer updated agent for monitoring? It is recommended, or the Log Analytics agent. My choice. I could decide what I want to do. And then I have to choose what the data collection rule will be. I have a default rule, as you can see, the one on top, long string. I can create my own rule. We do that just by creating new and enabling the monitoring that I want. And you'll see once I do that, let me go down here. Click Configure. That's going to go ahead and submit. Takes about a minute approximately to enable that. And then we start aggregating and gathering data within about 10 minutes to half an hour of that coming online, because the agent has to be instantiated and set up, and then it begins to report back. Now, what it's going to look like when it actually is reporting back is the following. Let's take a look at some of the data that we're going to see. we're going to be able to see things like performance. Now, these charts take a moment to generate, so don't worry when you go in here if it doesn't look like anything's happening right away. I'm monitoring 4 machines, so I can see color-coded what they look like. I've left them running for a couple of hours before our webinar today, so we have some data and we can see what they look like. I can isolate each individual machine by hovering and looking at the color, so I can see what each one looks like based on the color coding, but also based on the key down below. I can also look at CPU utilization and modify how that will come up. I can also look at available memory. I can look at bytes sent, bytes received, as well as disk space used. Basic monitoring. In addition, I can go in, and this is the really cool part. We have other charts, by the way, you guys can explore, but I want to show you the map view. The map view is going to show me something really interesting. As soon as it builds, I'm running a SQL server, as I mentioned. And I'm going to just zoom out here for a minute so you can see that, but we can see that in a slightly broader scale. And what I am looking at is a visual representation of that SQL server running and the connections inbound to it. And I'm going to be able to see some really interesting information. So if I look right here and I open this up, I know it's hard to see. And let me zoom in so you can see it while we are talking. We'll just kind of navigate around while we do that. But you can see here, I've got 2 IP addresses, each of which I can click through, and I can see information about what machines are connecting in and consuming services, or begin to see that. Let me go back here 1 second. I did not mean to do that. At 110%, it's hard to navigate. Let me do that. There we go. And what I'm also going to be able to see, and I'll show you this in just a minute, and this is the part of the view that I think is really valuable. I'm going to be able to see all the inbound connections from external users connecting into my SQL server. And let's say I go right here, I can see the ports that are open on port 80, port 53. I can also take a look right down here, and I can see, let me just move this up. I can see here that, if I can just get that to open, there we go, that I've got an outbound IP address, or an inbound connection, but I've got a conversation going on with it now, an external IP, and I can see information here. I see the inbound connections. I see other systems are talking to this one. I can see who they are. I can begin to see information about them, and I can drill in. Now, these are currently just the other machines that are running in my system, but I can look, and I can begin to look at traffic associated with those connections. I could see who's doing what, and I can begin to see a real-time view and a historical view of traffic and interconnection here. So Wes, Monitor is going to give me an all-up 360 view of resources in multiple categorical areas across my organization, from both a performance and impact in terms of use and resource availability perspective.
What a great way to have visibility and insight into the resources and what's going on with your solutions inside of the Azure platform. Now, I want to go ahead. I've got a question about another hidden gem, but I want to remind all of our viewers out there, go ahead and put your questions in. We'd love to give you some swag, but, well, if you don't give us those questions, we're not going to know that you have them. So the next one up here is, this is a product that's actually been around for a very long time, and it's now been extended to the cloud. And this is something that I'm very excited about, and it's a security context. Tell us a little bit about what is Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and why is it something that's going to be beneficial to our organization?
Absolutely. So Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and you're absolutely right when you said, Defender as a product line and an offering has been around for some time. Wes absolutely right to call that out. And he's also right to say, hey, it's been extended to the cloud recently. All those things are absolutely correct. And Defender as a product line is what we would think of, especially if you've been using Microsoft products for some time. You probably know the Defender name from the antivirus, anti-malware scanning engine that runs locally on every Windows product in terms of the operating system, or almost all of them anyway. And that is where Defender kind of starts its life many, many years ago, but becomes a much more robust security suite and product set of offerings over time, especially as Microsoft moves really forcefully into the cloud over the last decade or so, as they build out Azure and Microsoft 365, or you may know it as Office 365, now Microsoft 365 capabilities. And as they develop that platform, they realize, you know what, we need the same kind of security capabilities that we have in the on-premises world, in our environments where we run locally. we need those capabilities in the cloud. And this is what Defender has become. It's the extension of those defense capabilities across multiple areas, multiple different resource areas in and through the Azure landscape and even into Microsoft and Office 365 to give us those same capabilities. So the what is really a suite of defensive solutions that allow us to have extensible protections that run in and through the cloud, but not just in the cloud. They are available for essentially hybrid use. You can take many of these solutions and enable them and cover not just the cloud, but also the on-premises environment for hybrid connectivity. And in many respects, in many cases today, as we continue to extend that capability, we're now extending it to other cloud platforms. We actually cover Amazon, so AWS, and we also cover Google Cloud. We have monitoring and holistic extension capabilities to see what's going on with infrastructure we run as multi-cloud customers across those elements. We just have to incorporate them, add them in, and allow them to be monitored. So it is truly a multi-purpose platform that does all that monitoring. That also gets us into the why, Wes. Why is it so important for organizations to be able to use and leverage the Defender for Cloud, or more broadly, the Microsoft Defender ecosystem? It offers end-to-end protection for all of our resources, all of our infrastructure in the cloud, on premises, and in multi-cloud environments. So it is truly that Swiss Army knife that we are looking for in many respects, not all, but in many respects.
And I love how you mentioned end-to-end security. We have something running on our local machines, and now we can extend that into the cloud for sure. All right, I guess the next thing is, can we see this one in action here? Can we look at an overview of the Microsoft Defender for Cloud?
Absolutely. Let's take a look at what it looks like. We go back into Azure one more time. So we'll go back to the portal again, just resetting our view back to the dashboard. The Defender for Cloud is going to be right down there towards the bottom. It's actually, they're all clustered together. Monitor, Advisor, and Defender for Cloud are right there. Defender for Cloud at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. We'll go ahead and bring that up. Again, same thing. You could search for it any number of ways. Now, you have to onboard to use Defender for Cloud. Basic plan, basic capabilities, and or the extended, more premium capabilities. There is a kind of a sweetheart honeymoon phase where you can use it for free to see if you like it before Microsoft starts charging you. So there are some offers out there. Obviously, look to the main landing pages for Azure and search for Defender for Cloud. You can see what those capabilities and those potential opportunities to use the platform are. Let's assume you've onboarded. Let's assume you have tied your subscription in, as I have done, and you're using one or more of those levels of the cloud, the Defender for Cloud plans. When you do that, you go to the overview blade, you will see as we go in that we have one subscription. We can manage multiple subscriptions, by the way. We have about 60 resources that are currently being assessed. I have about 40 some odd active recommendations specific to cloud resources that I might want to take advantage of. Does not look like I have any security alerts currently on my all-up view on the overview, so that's good. I can see some breakdown on information here. Remember, I said we are multi-cloud. First platform, by the way, to be truly multi-cloud in terms of extending these capabilities to all three providers. We could see Azure right there. I've got about 26%, not about, I have 26% on my secure score, meaning I'm just over a quarter of the way towards where I would want to be at 100% to be fully instantiated, all recommendations enabled, and as secure and as aligned with best practices as Microsoft feels I can be. Notice I don't have anything in AWS or GCP currently. I do have these tied to my AWS and GCP tenants, but I'm not managing any active resources there right now. But I will be able to see a dashboard telling me what's happening with those and the current security stance by platform. Really impressive when you think about the fact that it's hard to get one vendor that can do all those things today. So that's really nice. We have regulatory compliance capabilities here with the frameworks that we may or may not be being held accountable to. So I'm thinking ISO standards, PCI DSS, NIST capabilities, and assessment for control compliance. Any and all those things are going to be integrated here. I can add those templates and those benchmarks if necessary, if they apply to my organization. And I can assess my infrastructure against the best practice recommendation frameworks and see where I stand, be given recommendations about what I need to change or modify. As we talked about, for instance, right, as we started with Azure, when we thought about and talked about Azure Advisor, get those recommendations. We can make changes to bring ourselves into alignment and do a lot of audit work with customers. This is a great benefit for us when we think about that, because what we can do, say to the customer, here's your current baseline. Here's where you are in relation to ISO. You could see right there, ISO 27001. Here's where we need to be. I've got 7 of 17 controls currently implemented and assessed. I have more I need to implement or best practice recommendations. We can talk then about an actionable plan to move from where we are to where we need to be compliant as part of an audit. It's a great benefit for the customer. It's a great benefit for the auditor. Everybody wins. I also get workload protection. The Defender for Cloud Products is really focused on two things. It's focused on workload protection. So how can I protect workloads that are running? And also what we call posture management. How am I doing from the perspective of best practice guidance and recommendations in terms of the strength of my security controls and how well they are working? Defender for Cloud brings both of these approaches together and gives us to them in one platform. If you join me back here, you'll see that we have the capability to drill down, take a look at workload protection, as well as assess my inventory and see where I am. Got a lot of red there, a lot of high impact unhealthy activities that I have to remediate. So this is just the overview, right? From here, I can then go in, I can look at recommendations, very similar to what we saw with Azure Advisor. And I can see the recommendations are then going to be listed. I can open up one like enabling MFA, for instance. I could see, just open this up, see if we can just bring that over from a, nope, can't slide it. Okay, no way. I'll just go ahead and click on it. You can see here, MFA should be enabled for accounts with owner permissions on subscription, whatever the case may be. You saw this. These are the same recommendations cross-referenced from Advisor. I said Advisor and the Microsoft Cloud for Defender, as well as Microsoft Monitor, right, or Azure Monitor, are all going to be interrelated. They are essentially extensions of one another. And we're using the same recommendations. Indeed, the Advisor recommendations that we see in Advisor are being used here. They're coming from, in this respect, with regards to cloud, they are coming from Microsoft Cloud for Defender. That's where we're seeing them. You can see the guidance right here. It includes some links to be able to click through things to understand how to do them. We took a look at this earlier. And I can go ahead and mark a resource exempt if I want to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm not going to apply this or apply this particular recommendation. I can mark that as exempt if I don't want to do that. So I can look at those recommendations. I can look at security alerts that may be created, and or if I have any, I can drill down and see what they are. I can look at inventory. And this is, again, a place where we're going to get a lot of value. I can see the total inventory that's here. I can see information about each individual element, whether it is compliant, and if so, great. If not, why not? And I also can go ahead, and I'm going to show you this report. I can download a CSV report, getting the full picture here, but I could also add non-Azure servers. This is where I bring in my capability to manage on-premises infrastructure. Remember, I mentioned it's not just multi-cloud, it's also on-premises and hybrid monitoring capabilities. I could add those on-premises resources, and I can monitor them and manage them here. There's a process you go through to do that. I could also, by the way, tie into my VMware infrastructure and create VMware resources and monitor them directly from here as well. Truly multi-vendor and multi-cloud. So if I download one of these reports, for instance, this report right here based on this information, or if I drill in, let's say hypothetically, and look at one, I'm not going to download, but I'm going to show you what one may look like. I have one downloaded. I would get something like this. I get a list of all the recommendations that are currently outstanding. I would get information about the subscription ID, the information, the resource group, all that, resource name. But I also get the resource type. I could see whether it's a subscription or virtual machine, as you saw. I could filter this because it's in Excel. I can also see the potential benefit. And if there is any cost savings, Microsoft will note that, and I can have that, again, creating that baseline for me to then create actionable plans. I work with customers all over the world, and I tell them on a regular basis, you know, if we have a plan and we can measure that in increments, we can identify how much progress you're making. What a great thing for you to be able to go back and report to your shareholders, your stakeholders, and your internal resources that are tracking this, as well as your risk management, right? You can track everything you're doing, and we can tell exactly where you were and exactly where you're going. So Wes, this is just an overview. There's obviously a lot more detail to all three of these particular gems you focused this on, but this is what it looks like, and this is how we can start to put it to use.
Most definitely. And man, what I tell you what, jam-packed with a lot of great information on maybe some of the gems that you haven't noticed as you make your way into Azure. All right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to open it up some questions here, and we got some questions coming in right now. Kodo is asking, people who work remotely, how can we make it to where they can reset their passwords and it populates on their login screen? And the question is a VPN needed for this?
So Kodo, for people that are working remotely, obviously, there's a lot of things we have to worry about. Microsoft, when I say Microsoft, I mean the Azure platform, does allow for self-service password reset. It's a relatively straightforward process to set up and populate. You could do this with on-premises resources as well, not just in Azure, but we're talking, I guess, at least I'm going to focus this question and answer from the perspective of focusing through the Azure platform. So we can enable self-service password reset, which would allow users to do this without having to engage their help desk or their service desk. If they don't, for any reason, enable this capability, then you just have a manual intervention where a support professional is able to reset that password. So we've had those capabilities for decades. That's not new. We've had self-service password reset now for the better part of a decade in one form or another. So that can be done. In terms of populating it on the Windows login screen, we don't populate it for you. That password is reset. You then, if you're doing self-service password reset, would be setting it yourself. You would figure out what you want it to be, and you would then know what it is to log in. If we are out of that process, meaning we're taking the human support professional out of the mix, then you're going to choose that password and you're going to know what it is and you'll populate it yourself. If this is an automated system and you're choosing a random password, it'll be generated and sent to you through an out-of-band capability where you'll have a challenge that will then be used to allow you to access and reset your password as a result of that. So that would be provided. Do you need a VPN for it? Absolutely not. There's no need to have a VPN when you log into the web portal and connect securely. You're doing so in an encrypted session for self-service password reset. All that traffic is encrypted, so there's no issue there. You don't need a VPN.
All right. Thank you so much for the question and the answer as well, Adam. We appreciate that. Jorn here is asking a question, and this is about practice, because we know that more practice makes perfection, right? Says, is the first month of Azure subscription truly free? I want to practice solidifying my knowledge that I've earned.
So Jorn, it is not only the first month that is truly free. It depends, of course, on how you choose to opt in, but the general baseline for Azure subscriptions and the free, what we call the free tier of services, there's a group of services that are available for free all the time, continuously, forever and ever, as long as you don't exceed the usage requirements, meaning you're given so many compute hours, you're given so much storage, so many transactions. All of that is available. It's all documented on the Azure landing page. When you go to set up your subscription, there is a growing list of services and features that are available for free forever. If you go exceed those usage quotas on a monthly basis, you then pay as you go. But in terms of the initial onboarding, let's say you're brand new to Azure, you want to start, you've never set up a tenant before, you've never had a subscription, Microsoft offers a $200 service credit. At least they do currently. That's $200 US, localized to your currency of choice, obviously, around the world. And you get to use the platform for free as long as that $200 is available and you spend it down smartly. That could take months, depending on how much you do and how quickly you do it. Or you could use it up perhaps in a couple of days, depending on the kind of systems you set up. So definitely follow up by going to the Azure landing page, look for the information about subscriptions, and see what your options are. But you definitely will get free use on an ongoing monthly basis, as well as $200 in service credits to begin your journey. And I wish you good luck in terms of studying and practicing.
All right, very good. Thank you for that question, and likewise with the answer. All right, next one's coming up from Jose. And you had talked about it, Azure, and talking about recommendations and best practices. So this is along that line. Does the advisor recommendation include checks for password guidelines or security patches on instantiated VMs?
So Jose, there definitely is guidance and recommendations around password strength, password hygiene. You saw, for instance, if you watched throughout the entire webinar, that when we got to Defender for Cloud, saw some of those recommendations, which indeed are feeding the advisor recommendations on the cloud side. We saw there was one about enabling MFA. So there's definitely going to be awareness of that. In terms of security patching on instantiated VMs, depending on how you choose to set up your VMs in what we call a managed virtual instance, because remember, we have on-premises infrastructure that can be managed, as well as virtual machines and physical hosts, right, that may be hosted locally, physically on premises, but also virtual workloads that are running in Azure or running in those physical instances on premises. The virtual machines that are created using the images from the Microsoft Marketplace are going to have patch management integrated directly. These days, the brand new images all are going to have patching turned on and automatically enabled. So in that respect, we should be keeping up to date unless we purposefully make a choice to ignore that guidance and go with a manual override for patching, in which case, yes, the burden is on us, and we would want to worry about that. There are going to be systems where we don't have that option, for instance, right? So we have to be aware of the fact not all systems are patched automatically and can be kept up to date on an automatic, ongoing basis. So there is going to be an assessment of that. It's not necessarily just going to come through Advisor, come just through Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Defender for Cloud, we didn't get into this, but it's made up of a series of services you turn on or enable that are pay as you go. One of them is to protect your servers. Another one is to protect SQL servers. Another one is to protect container instances, key vaults, et cetera. There's about 12 different service offerings that we have to opt in, turn on, and then pay for as we go. So if you opt in to protect your servers, we'll be looking at patch levels, but again, on the Windows side, because we're not doing the same thing on Linux, we're going to run a little differently. So it's a mixed bag there. But the best answer, best guidance I can give you is that patching is becoming an automated thought process across the platform. And if we follow best practice guidance, we should be aligned in supporting that. But if we opt out or create our own images, then that is going to vary. And there may be regulatory and statutory reasons why we do that. So we have to create exceptions to manage that as part of a risk management thought process.
All right, Jose, thank you so much for that question. All right, Adam, this one's coming out of YouTube, off of YouTube, and this is about webhooks. It says, what benefits me to create a webhook in an app service in Azure?
All right, so YouTube, right? So what benefits or do we get when we create a webhook in an app service in Azure? So app services that are running, whether they're in Azure or any cloud provider's platform, it doesn't really matter, are going to provide capabilities for external users to access and consume some sort of an application-based service. And usually as a result of that, they're going to provide data. Perhaps it's a customer logging in and doing some transactions through a bank, for instance, using a financial service, financial management service. Maybe it is a web app of some kind that's running that we're going to be able to order something in an e-commerce setting from. App services can be just about anything today, right? They're all web enabled, and webhooks allow us to be able to manage, extend those capabilities, provide visibility through monitoring and management, a variety of different things. They're used to hook, literally, to grab onto and consume various aspects of those services programmatically. So there's many, many things that you will get as a benefit if you're creating webhooks into various services, the app services in this case in Azure. But the use cases vary. And it really depends on your needs of an organization and how they are providing and ultimately want those app services to be consumed. Many of them will provide standardized API support. Some of them will use custom proprietary APIs. So it varies greatly. Really, what you need to be doing there is working with your development team and understanding how they want to present and provide access to that web service, allow customers to consume it, in other words, and then they make the decision about whether webhooks, and if so, under what cases, and therefore what kinds of webhooks will be made available and how they'll be consumed.
All right, Adam, great information. This next one is about conditional access, and it's coming in from Art. It says, what are some risk-based rules you can implement with conditional access?
So Art, we can implement all sorts of stuff with conditional access. The name itself tells you everything, right? We grant access based on you meeting a series, one or more of conditions that we specify, whether those conditions are that you have to be coming from a certain subnet. Maybe you have to be running a certain operating system, as we were just talking about, maybe with a certain patch level. Maybe you have to be accessing during a certain time window. Maybe after hours or before hours is barred, but during business hours is allowed, right? Maybe you have to come from a certain geography. So there's a whole series of conditions that we can specify. The idea of conditional access, first and foremost, is the idea of risk management. We want to minimize the likelihood of bad actors gaining unauthorized, illegal, illicit action by blocking their access to a system. If we prevent unauthorized users from gaining access because we pile up so many conditions that control the access gate, that it only is opened if they meet all of those conditions, essentially a defense in depth mentality, where we pile one condition on top of another, building multiple layers of defense. You have to meet all those conditions to pass through the gate. Likelihood of those bad actors meeting all those conditions certainly is possible, but it goes down as we add those conditions, meaning the more conditions we have, less likely it is bad actors can meet all of them. All of this is risk-based. So it's fair to say that the entire approach of conditional access is built around the idea of risk mitigation, and therefore using risk-based conditional management to be able to specify that if you do these things, you're not likely going to present a risk. And if you don't, your likelihood of presenting risk is very high. And that's why we want to block access and make sure you're not allowed in.
All right, Adam, we appreciate taking the time to such great information in the answers here. And everybody, thank you so much out there for asking those questions. Don't be afraid when you join our webinars to ask those questions. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to announce the winner. But before we do that, I think we've got some information from Miss Lauren Deal.
For all of those great questions. And stay tuned. We're going to announce the winner of the t-shirt in just a moment. You can check out a free ITProTV membership, no credit card required, with access to select courses and our daily live feed. You can also get a full personal membership that provides complete access to all the ITProTV courses, with or without practice exams and virtual labs. Oh, and if you're on a team, you'll definitely want to check out the business page, which offers a tour of the Pro Portal, used to maximize your team's investment in training. Oh, and don't forget to enter the promo code webinar30 when you sign up for an ITProTV membership to get your 30% off the purchase of your personal membership.
All right, everybody, it is about that time that we are going to mention the winner. We'd like to thank everybody for being here, but let's see, it looks like Jose, you are going to be the winner of our swag. No, don't put any of your information in any public chat. We will reach out to you, and we will make sure that you get your swag. And on behalf of myself, Adam, and everybody else here at ITProTV, we just want to take the opportunity to say thank you for watching, and we hope to see you on the next webinar.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. You will receive a link to the recording of the webinar delivered to your inbox.